Okay, hey, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today we have another update for you from the brand AVI-8. A little bit about them. They're the sister brand to Spinnaker, but instead of nautical and diver-oriented themes, AVI-8 really focuses on aviation and pilot-style watches. Now, in terms of a pilot's watch, some key common characteristics and design language when you're looking for a pilot's watch, you're typically going to want to be looking for that balance of legibility and functionality, which I think is really showcased here on the dial of the Spitfire Smith automatic AV-4090-02, known as the Birmingham colorway. Essentially, this Spitfire Smith automatic is designed to celebrate the innovation and inspirational work of Joseph Smith, who was the chief designer at the famed British aircraft manufacturer Supermarine. And he essentially helped guide development of the iconic Spitfire fighter plane. And this thing is actually really cool. Was just released recently, back in the beginning of February, depending on when you watch this, of 2022. You can get these for $330 direct from the brand, and I think it is pretty competitive for a watch like this. So you're essentially able to get, a pretty well spec'd, and I think well balanced and in pretty much every way type of pilot's watch for not a lot of money. So I think it's pretty cool, and it's totally what AVI-8 is really known for. So why don't we zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a look at some of the details as to why this piece is so engaging. Okay. So as you can see, pretty straightforward. When you look at this, you think definitely aviation theme. You see, of course, the 0 at 12, which is quite significant. And you've seen other brands do something like this in the past. Hamilton's very well known for it. But I think the numerals, of course, and the typeface, I like the way that they kind of offset the numerals all the way around here, so you're going to be able to see some kind of at varying levels have very high contrast. So those cardinal points definitely going to be higher contrast with that more white color against the blue background, but then you're also going to see the other scales in highlighted with orange, and then some more subdued, as you can see, in that gray colorway. So very cool from that perspective. A little piece of dust there on the dial. But let's get into the specs here, guys. As a typical pilot's watch should wear, this is a 42 millimeter. Now, that is definitely very specific to a pilot's watch. I know a lot of people's kind of everyday sweet spot is going to be in the 40 millimeter or smaller, but for a pilot's watch, something like this, obviously with all of this information on there, it gets tougher to do as you scale that down. So I think 42 is a bit of a sweet spot when you are looking for a watch within this style. And then with it being a 42, it also has 22 millimeter lug width there. So again, that helps with the proportions of the piece. So it doesn't look overly bulbous. I think it flows really well. And if this was 20 millimeters, then you would expect a 40 millimeter watch. Do I think that this model could be successful as a 40? Absolutely, but I can appreciate the fact that it goes thematically with what they were going for as a pilot's piece, for it to be within that kind of 42 millimeter sweet spot. So this is a full-size pilot, not an extra large, not a mid-size. This is a full-size pilot's watch. Now, the thickness here is only 14.2 millimeters in height. You can see the really nice little accenting done there with the etching. You can see kind of the faux rivet style, and then also like the front view of the plane when you can see the wings. Very nice. On the opposite side, similar affair in terms of the faux riveting, and it just adds again to that very industrial aviation style, and I think it ties in really nicely to the overall theme, and really can't complain from that perspective. It's a nice touch. It's not overly, it's not overdoing it. As you can see here at this angle, it doesn't distract or detract from the look of the watch. The thing that I like is that it really adds to it. Now, when we get into the fit and finish here, guys, look at that finely polished bevel on the lugs. Really nice. And then also when you look at the bezel here, it does have that nice brushing that goes all the way around, but then you get this nice flat undercut that is highly polished, and it ties in as well. So really nice little pops of flash there. Most of kind of the talking that this watch does is through the dial design, but I think the case also does have a lot to say and speaks for itself in terms of its own merits. Looking really sharp there, so very cool. You can see there's a lot of distortion in this single domed sapphire crystal, but at this price point, to get a nice sapphire is great. Also, you're going to see a lot of AR coating. Look at that, as it kind of bounces off, and that's part in due to the fact that it is domed. If this was flat, it would probably be picking up a lot less of those secondary flashes and flares of blue that come up. That's just the AR coating. I will say, when you wear this out in the real world, it's typically going to be less reflective than that, but you will catch yourselves in certain lighting situations, typically indoors with overhead lighting, where you're going to see that kind of blue flash pop up. Some of you may like it, some of you may not. I'm a bit indifferent to it. Personally, I think it does add, I guess it's kind of like having a single dome. It does add a bit of play in terms of kind of visual interest at angles, but then at the same time, it is hurting legibility ultimately quite a bit. So at least at harsh angles. So yeah, it can go either way. I don't want my pet peeves to sink into your guys' psyches, but I did want to point those pieces out for you if you were interested, or from those aspects in terms of viewing angle. Now, the non-screw down crown is unsigned, but it does have some nice design to it, as you can see there. Not just a typical onion style. They do have, I think, a really nice look there. Nice and flowy, goes with the case. Good size, good grip, great to interact with there. Winding action, quite nice. The leather here is actually quite supple, which is great, because typically a cheap leather will be really kind of cardboard-like. This actually feels really soft. It doesn't feel expensive in any way, but it just feels really comfortable, so I can appreciate that. It has a certain airiness to it, and I think that's because of what they stuffed the inside with. I think there's some level of some type of foam that's in there that just gives it kind of a light, airy feel, and definitely quite pliable and supple from that perspective as well. Now, when you look at the back, very cool display case back. Great custom rotor on this Seiko Instruments NH35 movement there. So very cool, guys. Like, they didn't have to do that. I thought that was a really nice touch in terms of that decorated rotor. I think it actually looks really great and ties in perfectly to this case back. It looks really, really cool. I'm surprised that AVI-8 did that. I feel like this is something, it just comes together really well. And I just don't expect it from a watch that costs only around $300. So I think that's really cool. Most places you're going to get an NH movement to really be more of a cost saver. So they don't necessarily throw on the cool, executed and well themed custom rotor there. So I really like that. Even like the gauge of the etching matches the weight of the lines here on the etching of the case back, which is really, really nice. So I can appreciate that. Now, in terms of the dial, you're getting a very nice dark matte blue finish, multi-layered. Of course, there are different steps and kind of levels to it all, different angles. You're seeing those kind of raised and printed indices. You get that nice date at 3 o'clock there. I think it's nice. I appreciate the fact that it does have the white font over the black disc. And then, painted hands there, loomed. The loom on here is very nice. It's Swiss Super Luminova, but it glows green. It doesn't say what, it's not specified in terms of which loom that it is, like which compound. In terms of the water resistance, it is 5 atmospheres or 50 meters. So it definitely does the job, as long as you have that non-screw down crown pushed in, you should be fine to submerge this. And you know, of course, splashes, rain, you'll be good. But yeah, that's the main thing. I know a lot of people, "Oh, well, if it's rated that deep, you should be able to take it that deep," and it will be fine as long as the crown is pushed in, but since it's not a screw down crown, you can't guarantee that will always be pushed in. So for me, I don't really like to submerge anything that isn't water resistant to at least 100 meters. And then again, it's still dependent on the crown being pushed in. But from this perspective, it's a pilot's watch. This isn't meant to be some everyday adventure watch, field watch, diver's watch, or anything like that. Not water sports related at all. So I think it'll be absolutely fine and will do the job. And I'm not worried about this taking in any amount of water anytime soon. So with that said, let's go ahead, get this piece on the wrist and see how it wears. Okay guys, as you can see on my 7¼ inch wrist, it wears really nicely. Some of you might be saying, "Oh man, that's too big." But guess what guys, it's a pilot's watch. It should be rather large. It's not oversized or anything like that or overbearing. You can see the case slopes and wraps around the wrist really quite nicely. And then you do have this nice leather strap with the great little touches here and the accenting with the stitching, which I can appreciate. Nice milled clasp. Everything flows really nicely. 22 millimeters at the lugs. And then it has a nice little taper down to around 18 down here. Actually, you know what? I'm feeling like this is probably tapers closer down to 20, and maybe my notes are wrong on that. So sign buckle, AVI-8, really well done. You can even see there's a slight step in the milling there, so it does wrap around again from that aspect, and you can look at it at angle there. It sits nicely on the wrist, and yeah, it fits the bill, guys. This is what a pilot's watch should look like. It should be bold. Not every watch is meant to mimic a Datejust or a Rolex Explorer, you know, or an Aquaterra or something like that. Those kind of staples within the everyday affair. You know, you look at things like IWC, Hamilton, and you know, various other brands that have some really great pilot's watches. Even Seiko and Orient have some great pilot's watches. But at this price point, it's really cool that you are getting, of course, that hacking hand windable movement, sapphire crystal with an AR coating at a really, really affordable price. And I like that it just hits kind of all those points in terms of, you know, the theme and the iconography around pilot's watches and aviation in general. I think it does a nice job not being too over the top, and being quite balanced, and I think having a little bit of crossover appeal to where somebody who might not even really be heavily into watches could see something like this and really like it. And then I think somebody who can appreciate a collection of pilot's watches could also appreciate this aesthetic as well. So let's go ahead, get this off of the wrist now. You know, charge it up a bit, do some low light transition loom shots and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights. As you can see, the loom is pretty fantastic. The raised indices, they just feel like they have a bit of a 3D-ness to them. And some of that is due to just really, you know, a lot of loom being applied, which I can appreciate. But something I do like to do when we do loom shots is work in some low light transition, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to be, you know, coming in and out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, underneath the shade of a tree, or maybe just spending time in your favorite automobile. So it's nice to see what these watches render, you know, how the colors render, how the textures hold and reflect light in less than optimal lighting. So I'll even get into some harsh lighting here, which typically would expose any type of kind of factory defects. You can see though that the brushing, the light just kind of glides over it really well, and then the high polish goes from really bright and reflective to quite dark as no light is being reflected off of it as it transitions. The blues are very nice. The strap color matches very closely with the dial, and since it's quite subdued, it doesn't feel too matchy. As from far away, a lot of times these darker blues can just render as black just with some reflection. So very nice from that perspective. And look at how legible this is, you know, coming in and out of that. So very, very cool from that perspective. Camera has to refocus now. There we go. Yes. So this is a good looking watch, I have to say. And it does the job, you know, and there are some very expensive, very simple aviation watches out there. And I love that you can kind of hit a lot of those same points for a lot less money. And this doesn't feel like ultra derivative or anything. I mean, you have kind of some of those key elements from, like, let's say a Flieger kind of B style dial. And at the same time, it doesn't, you know, when you look at the hand shape and just the general layout, they just do little things to kind of tweak it and make it their own. And I can appreciate that. Closing thoughts on this one, guys. On the wrist, it wears like a pilot's watch should. Great proportions, you know, not too big, not too small type of feel. So I think that's really great. It does hit that. In terms of model variants, there's black and green dial options with patinaed lume, as well as a black case model with a similar kind of modern lume comparable to this blue dial as you see here. And that was kind of what made this one my pick of the group. Was I did like, of course, you guys know I like blue dial watches, and then I'm not huge on patinaed lume, so this for me was kind of the fresh take, and I'm glad I went with this one. Definitely check their site for, you know, for availability. I know these things kind of come and go in waves, so if you guys can still get your hands on one, I think this is quite competitive for the price point. I've reviewed, you know, a few options from Seiko that I think are quite comparable, and they're going to cost a little bit more typically, and they're going to have a hard Lex crystal, and then you compare stuff, I'd say it's pretty similar from Orient, probably a little cheaper on the Orient side, but you know, you're typically not going to be getting the Sapphire. So those are just things to consider, guys. Of course, Orient and Seiko have a bit more of a lineage there, but for something like this, it's not like Orient or Seiko are really known for, you know, this type of watch. Their brands are known, but you know, ultimately this is still kind of a certain theme that I think a lot of brands tap into without necessarily having, you know, full horological chops tying back years and years and years. So in terms of comparable models, again, if you were to compare this to the likes of, let's say, Seiko or Orient, you know, similar price point, you'd end up not getting that Sapphire AR coated crystal. So, I mean, bottom line on this one, guys, it's a fun entry-level pilot's watch under $350 from a brand that's relatively recognizable at this point. You know, AVI-8, Spinnaker, those guys are just putting out watches all the time. They sell like hotcakes. There's a reason for it. They're just well spec'd, and I think they're well priced. And yeah, they have a keen design that offers a nice bit of transitional kind of coverage, and I think that's cool. Like, you know, a watch fan could enjoy this as well as a non-watch fan. So, which probably makes it good for gift giving and stuff like that. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you liked the video, please do hit like. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.